occasionally we like to talk about teams that challenge the Yankees. One that's always been a challenge is the Boston Red Sox in the American League East. So Jack and I are going to focus now on the Red Sox specifically as we take a look at some of these teams that are on the board and talk about the additions and subtractions here, Jack, that some of the Red Sox have had. And it starts at the top with the new manager, Bobby Valentine.
Right, when you talk about the 2012 Red Sox, you really do have to start in the dugout. You have to start with Bobby Valentine. And I do think after that collapse in last September, Bob, what Valentine gives them, he gives them a guy who can come in and start with a clean slate. You know that Valentine is going to bring energy. Is Valentine also going to say something or do something that every once in a while the Red Sox are going to shake their heads? Absolutely. But I think that he was the perfect guy for them to hire because they do have a mess from last year that they need to clean up.
And as you take a look at the bottom right there, you see some of the changes. Not only Terry Francona gone, Bobby Valentine in, but new front office. Theo Epstein went to the Cubs, so Ben Cherington is in. They lost their closer in Papelbon. Let's talk right now about the job that Cherington has done so far. He was kind of patient early on. He kind of had to survey the land, but he's made some deals now.
He has, and I'm going to steal a line from Brian Cashman, who I was talking to last week. When I asked him about the Red Sox, he said, I think Ben Cherington has had an excellent offseason. And he was principally talking about what Cherington has done in that bullpen that you mentioned, Bob. He lost Papelbon. Papelbon took off and signed with the Phillies. But he was able to engineer two deals. He gets Melanson first from the Astros. This was always a guy they saw as a setup guy. But then he gets Andrew Bailey. This is a young pitcher, a guy who has 75 saves over the last 3 years. He's dealt with some elbow issues. But, Bob, I like this move a lot. I think Bailey is a guy, he's a closer who's only going to get better. But saying that I like these moves, the Melanson and then Bailey combination, if I were the Yankees, I still look at Bard, Papelbon, and that combination from last year still would frighten me more than a Melanson-Bailey combination.
And I want to add this about Cherington, the fact that there's a big cost savings in that closer's role as well between what they would have had to pay Papelbon and what they'll pay Bailey.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. You talk about Melanson and Bailey. They'll make less than half of what Papelbon made last year. And the Red Sox have always been that kind of organization. This was Theo Epstein's theory, and this is something that will carry on even after he's gone. They don't want to pay big money for closer. And that's why I always believed that once Papelbon hit free agency, he was going to leave Boston.
All right, now, obviously, he's going to have to look into some starting pitching, Ben Cherington is. So let's take a look at this, because you've got Beckett, Lester, Buchholz, Bard, and Matsuzaka. But when you consider the fact that Matsuzaka might not start the season, does Ben Cherington have to go out and look for help?
I like the way you wipe Matsuzaka off there, Bob, because that's what I was about to say is we have Matsuzaka on the graphic, but that's only for window dressing, because I don't see him contributing to the Red Sox. So, yes, Cherington would still like to add more. They're going to try Bard in the rotation, and when I talked to Bobby Valentine at the winter meetings, he talked about Bard or Aceves sliding to that rotation, but he also was honest about it. He said, we think they both can do it, but let's see what they do when the season begins. Let's go answer those questions at spring training. So what has Cherington done? He's kind of decided that he's going to emulate what Brian Cashman did last year. He's going into that bargain basement. They've added Aaron Cook, and this is a guy who his agent Joe Bick tried to sell the Yankees on signing Cook, and they didn't bite on that. And they've also added Carlos Silva. What did the Yankees do last year? It was Freddie Garcia and Bartolo Colon. So Cherington, like Cashman last year, is trying to solve some of his rotation problems without going out there and spending the big money. We know the Kurodas and the Oswalts and people like that are still out there, but right now the Red Sox haven't bitten on any of those guys.
All right, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to hit some free agent starters here as we take a look at that. You mentioned Kuroda Oswalt. They wouldn't pay for a guy like Edwin Jackson, right, because he wants too many years and dollars.
Right, and we don't know if Boris's client Jackson is going to get that, but you look at some of those names and you would say, sure, could the Red Sox use some of these guys? Absolutely. Kuroda is a guy they would love to probably get on a one-year deal. But Kuroda is a pitcher, he puzzles me because last year he didn't want to waive the no-trade clause. We know he still has an offer to go back to Japan. He didn't want to leave the West Coast this year. Is he a guy who would be happy pitching in the Northeast? You worry about the injury factor. Same thing could be said for Roy Oswalt. If you got Roy Oswalt on a one-year deal at a very low number, you might be interested in that. But when you talk to people around the Yankees, they talk about Oswalt's back, and they just don't want to go near it.
All right, I'm going to mark one other guy here because he's a known commodity for them, Tim Wakefield. Or do you think that ship has sailed now for them?
I think that ship has sailed. I think Wakefield would be a guy if it was a week before spring training or something like that, and you wanted one more guy to maybe fill out your roster on a 12-man roster, Could he be your 12th pitcher? I think Wakefield could probably still do that, but I don't think you see Wakefield as a guy you want to throw out there in any important role.
All right. Finally, let's talk about their defense. And as we take a look at it, very solid. The infield won't change. There are questions, at least in my mind, and I think some of the Red Sox fans, about right field. Are they going to have to go out and get somebody there?
Right. There are questions about right field. And right now, what the Red Sox are telling people is they're going to stick with Sweeney. They were able to get Sweeney in the deal with Oakland, and they believe that he is a guy who can come over here. He's been a high on-base percentage guy, or a decent on-base percentage guy, about 340 over the last couple of years. But, Bob, here's the thing about Sweeney in right field. Forget about any power. This is a guy who has 14 career homers and about 1,700 at-bats in his career. They're talking about some sort of Sweeney, Darnell, McDonald combination out there. Again, they're not going to get any power. Josh Reddick is a guy who would have given them more power, but, of course, they had to give him up in that deal, and they're going to give Sweeney a ride out there. They think he's a guy who, with the on-base percentage and the decent defense, they could get by with him out there.
All right, that is going to do it for our Red Sox breakdown here on Yankees Baseball Daily.